They planted the gun. They falsified the report. They swore on the Bible that he was a dangerous criminal. To Officer Bradley Mitchell, Nathan Cross was just another thug he could frame to boost his arrest record. A helpless victim in a broken system. But Mitchell made a fatal mistake. He didn't check who he was pulling over. He didn't know that the man in handcuffs wasn't a street dealer, but a senior special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, wearing a wire that was streaming directly to Washington, D.C. You're about to witness one of the most satisfying courtroom takedowns in history. This is what happens when corrupt police lie in court and the defendant pulls out his FBI ID. The rain on Tuesday, November 14th, was the kind that didn't wash the streets clean. Clear's throat, it just made the grime slicker. Nathan Cross drove his beat-up 2018 Honda Accord down 7th Street, keeping his hands visible on the wheel, even though he was alone. He wasn't speeding. His tags were current. His tail lights were functional. But when he saw the blue and red lights flash in his rear-view mirror, he wasn't surprised. He had been circling the block of the 58th Precinct for 3 days, waiting for this specific predator. Sergeant Bradley Mitchell. Mitchell was a legend in Riverside, but for all the wrong reasons. To the city council, he was a super cop with the highest drug bust rate in the district. To the residents of the East Side, he was a terror, a man who planted evidence as easily as he breathed. Nathan pulled over under the flickering street lamp near the abandoned textile factory. He cut the engine. He lowered the window. License and registration. Mitchell barked. Flashlight beam cutting into Nathan's eyes. There was no good evening. There was no "do you know why I stopped you?" "It's in the glove box, officer," Nathan said, his voice level, his demeanor terrifyingly calm. "I am reaching for it now." "Watch it," Mitchell yelled, his hand dropping to his holster. His partner, a rookie named Officer Carl Jensen, stood by the passenger side, looking nervous. Jensen was new. He was the audience Mitchell needed. Nathan moved with agonizing slowness. He handed over the ID. It was a standard Illinois driver's license. Name, Nathan Cross. Occupation consultant. Mitchell sneered at the ID. "Get out of the car, Cross. I smell marijuana." It was the oldest lie in the book. Nathan had never smoked a day in his life. He stepped out into the rain. Water soaking his hoodie immediately. "Turn around. Hands on the hood." As Nathan complied, he watched his reflection in the wet paint of the car. He saw Mitchell lean into the open driver's window. He saw the subtle dip of Mitchell's shoulder, the body language of a man reaching into his own vest. Not the car. The drop. Mitchell emerged 3 seconds later, holding a baggie of white powder and a snub-nosed .38 revolver with the serial number filed off. Well, Mitchell laughed, a harsh sound against the thunder. "Look what we have here. Riding dirty, huh? Officer Jensen, bag this. We got him on possession with intent and an illegal firearm." Jensen hesitated. "SGE, I didn't see that in the eyes," said "Bag it, Jensen." Mitchell snapped, his eyes daring the rookie to speak up. Jensen looked at Nathan, then at the gun. He broke eye contact and opened the evidence bag. The blue wall of silence was being built brick by brick right in front of Nathan. Mitchell slammed Nathan against the hood, wrenching his arms back to cuff him. He leaned close to Nathan's ear, his breath smelling of stale coffee and tobacco. "You're done, boy. You're going away for 10 years. Don't worry about your car. We'll auction it off. Nathan didn't struggle. He didn't scream. He didn't beg. He just looked Mitchell dead in the eye as the cuffs clicked tight. "Make sure you spell my name right on the report, Sergeant," Nathan said softly. Mitchell laughed and shoved him toward the cruiser. "I'll spell it however I want, inmate." What Mitchell didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was that the button on Nathan's hoodie wasn't plastic. It was a high-definition wide-angle lens, and the battery pack taped to Nathan's chest, currently buzzing with a gentle heat, was uploading terabytes of data to a secure server at the J. Edgar Hoover Building in Washington, D.C. The trap was set. Now Nathan just had to wait for the cheese. 3 months later, Courtroom 6D smelled like floor wax and despair. The 58th District Court was where justice usually went to die. The walls were paneled in dark oak that hadn't been polished since the Reagan administration. The fluorescent lights hummed with a headache-inducing frequency. Nathan sat at the defendant's table wearing a cheap suit provided by his public defender. He looked small. He looked defeated. This was part of the performance. His attorney, Rachel Thompson, was a good woman buried under a mountain of cases. She had 40 other files on her desk. But she liked Nathan. He was polite. He was quiet. But she was terrified for him. "Clear's throat, Nathan," she whispered, shuffling through the discovery papers. "They're offering a plea. 5 years. With good behavior, you're out in 3. If we go to trial, Mitchell is testifying. The jury loves him. Judge Patterson typically sides with the police. If you lose, you're looking at 15 years mandatory minimum." Nathan looked at the jury selection, mostly suburbanites, people who trusted the badge implicitly. Then he looked at the prosecution's table. Assistant District Attorney Vincent Carter was a man who measured his success in convictions, not justice. He was laughing with Sergeant Mitchell, checking his watch, looking like he had a golf tee time to catch at 3 p.m. "Clear's throat, no deal, Rachel," Nathan said. Rachel sighed, rubbing her temples. "Nathan, please. It's Sergeant Mitchell. His word is gold in this county." "Gold can be melted, Rachel," Nathan said. "We go to trial." "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. The Honorable Judge Margaret Patterson swept into the room. She was a stern woman with silver hair and a reputation for handing out maximum sentences to drug dealers. She peered over her glasses at Nathan, her eyes cold. She had seen 1,000 men like him, or, Clear's throat, at least who she thought he was. "Case number 24, B900, the People vs. Nathan Cross," she announced. "Charges: possession of a controlled substance, possession of an illegal firearm, resisting arrest." "Are we ready to proceed?" "The people are ready, Your Honor," Ada Carter said, standing up and buttoning his expensive jacket. "The defense is ready," Rachel said, her voice wavering slightly. Ada Carter didn't waste time. His opening statement was a masterclass in bias. He painted the picture of a dark, rainy night, a heroic police officer risking his life, and a dangerous criminal prowling the streets with a loaded gun. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Carter concluded, pointing a manicured finger at Nathan. "That man sitting there looks innocent today. He's wearing a suit. He's shaven. But do not be fooled. On the night of November 14th, he was a threat to our community. And thanks to the bravery of Sergeant Mitchell, that threat was neutralized." Nathan sat perfectly still. He was counting the seconds. He needed Mitchell to commit. He needed the lie to be on the official court record. The moment Sergeant Bradley Mitchell took the stand, the energy in the room shifted. He wore his Class A uniform, medals gleaming on his chest, his stripes perfectly pressed. He looked like the poster child for law and order. He placed his hand on the Bible. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "So help you God," the Clare asked. "I do," Mitchell said, his voice deep and reassuring. Clear's throat, Ada Carter walked him through the preliminaries. Name, rank, years of service. 15 years serving the good people of Riverside, Mitchell said, smiling at the jury. The jury smiled back. "Sergeant Mitchell," Carter said, pacing in front of the jury box. "Take us back to the night of November 14th. Why did you stop the defendant?" Mitchell turned to the jury, making eye contact. "I observed the suspect's vehicle swerving erratically across the center line on 7th Street. Given the weather conditions and the proximity to a known drug trafficking area, I initiated a traffic stop for safety. Line number 1, Nathan had driven perfectly straight. And what happened when you approached the vehicle?" The driver, the defendant, Mr. Cross, was immediately aggressive. Mitchell continued, his face showing practiced concern. He refused to lower his window. When he finally did, I was hit with the overwhelming odor of unburnt marijuana. I asked for his license, and he began reaching under his seat. Line number 2. Nathan had reached for the glove box as instructed. I feared for my safety, Mitchell said, dropping his voice to a hush. In my experience, reaching under a seat usually means one thing, a weapon. I ordered him out of the car. He resisted. I had to forcibly remove him for his own safety and mine. Rachel Thompson was scribbling furiously, shaking her head. And what did you find in the car, Sergeant? Under the driver's seat, exactly where he was reaching, I recovered a .38 caliber revolver, fully loaded, and approximately 50 g of cocaine. The courtroom gasped. Judge Patterson glared at Nathan. Did the defendant say anything? Carter asked. Mitchell smirked, a tiny, almost imperceptible curl of his lip. Yes, he told me. You'll never make this stick, pig. I run these streets. Nathan's jaw tightened. It was the first time he showed emotion. The pure audacity of the fabrication was almost impressive. Thank you, Sergeant, Carter said, looking triumphant. Your witness, Rachel Thompson stood up. She did her best. She asked about the lack of dash cam footage. Unfortunately, Mitchell said with a feigned sigh. Due to the heavy rain and a technical malfunction with the precinct server that night, the dash cam footage was corrupted. It's a shame, really. I would have loved for the jury to see exactly how violent this man was. And your body cam? Rachel asked. Malfunctioned as well. Batteries don't last like they used to, Mitchell quipped. A few jurors chuckled. Rachel looked defeated. She had nothing. No footage, no witnesses other than the rookie partner who was too scared to talk. She sat down. Redirect? The judge asked. No, Your Honor. The prosecution rests, Carter said. Judge Patterson looked at the clock. Does the defense have any witnesses? Rachel leaned over to Nathan. We have nothing, Nathan. I can try to call a character witness. Maybe your landlord. Nathan stood up. He buttoned his cheap suit jacket. He looked at the judge, then at Vance, who was still sitting in the witness box, looking smug. Your Honor, Nathan said, his voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. The defense calls the defendant, Nathan Cross, to the stand. Rachel gasped. Nathan, no, you can't. He'll tear you apart on cross-examination. Trust me, Nathan whispered. As Nathan walked to the stand, Mitchell watched him with the eyes of a wolf watching a wounded deer. He didn't know that the deer was actually a lion. Nathan took the oath. He sat down. Mr. Cross, Rachel said, standing up nervously. Did you commit these crimes? No, Nathan said. Did you swerve your car? No. Did you have a gun? No. Rachel didn't know what else to ask. She sat down. Mr. Carter, your witness, the judge said. Carter practically ran to the podium. He was going to enjoy this. Mr. Cross, Carter began, dripping with sarcasm. So, Sergeant Mitchell, a decorated officer of the law, is lying. Is that your defense? A conspiracy? Yes, Nathan said calmly. And why would he lie? Why would he risk his career to frame a nobody like you? Nathan leaned forward into the microphone. Because he needed to meet his quota, and because he thought I was a nobody, but he was wrong. Wrong about what? Carter snapped. You are unemployed. You live in a studio apartment. You have no alibi. Actually, Nathan said, his eyes locking onto Mitchell. I am not unemployed and I have the best alibi in the world. Oh, really? Carter laughed. And what is that? I would like to enter a piece of evidence that the prosecution missed, Nathan said. He reached into his inner jacket pocket. Two bailiffs flinched, hands going to their belts. Nathan moved slowly. He pulled out a small silver USB drive. Objection, Carter yelled. This wasn't submitted in discovery. On the contrary, Nathan said, looking at the judge, this evidence falls under Federal Jurisdiction Rule 404. It is classified material that was declassified. Exactly. He checked his watch 2 minutes ago. Judge Patterson looked confused. Classified? Mr. Cross. Who exactly are you? Nathan reached into his pocket again. Clear's throat, this time, he didn't pull out a wallet. He pulled out a leather credential case. He flipped it open. Clear's throat, the gold badge caught the fluorescent light. I am Senior Special Agent Nathan Cross, FBI Public Corruption Unit, Nathan announced, his voice thundering through the silence. And for the last 6 months, Sergeant Mitchell has been the primary target of Operation Blue Rot. Mitchell's face went from smug to gray in the span of a heartbeat. The blood drained from his cheeks so fast he looked like a corpse. This USB drive, Nathan held it up, contains the encrypted 4K video and audio from the button camera I was wearing during the arrest. It also contains the audio from the wire I've been wearing in the holding cell when Officer Jensen came to apologize to me last night. Bailiff. Judge Patterson screamed, slamming her gavel. Secure the doors. Nobody leaves this courtroom. Clear's throat, the silence in courtroom 6D was heavy, suffocating. It was the kind of silence that precedes a natural disaster. Judge Patterson stared at the badge in Nathan's hand. She looked at the federal ID number. She looked at the holographic seal. She was a hardliner, a judge who sided with the police 99% of the time. But she was not stupid. She knew what the penalty was for impersonating a federal officer. Nobody would be insane enough to do it inside a courtroom while on trial for a felony. Mr. Carter, Judge Patterson said, her voice trembling with a mix of rage and fear. If this evidence is what the defendant claims it is, we have a very serious problem. Oda Carter was pale. He was looking at Sergeant Mitchell. Mitchell was gripping the railing of the witness stand so hard his knuckles were white. His eyes were darting around the room, looking for an exit. But the two bailiffs, big men named Kowalski and Rodriguez, had moved to block the swinging gate. "Your Honor," Carter stammered. I have not seen this footage. I object to overruled." Patterson snapped, losing her composure. "If this is exculpatory evidence that proves perjury, I will see it now. Clark, plug in the drive." The court clerk, a young woman named Amanda, took the silver USB drive from Nathan's hand as if it were a holy relic. She plugged it into the court's presentation laptop. The large projector screen behind the witness stand flickered to life. File 001. Nathan directed calmly from the stand. Timestamp November 14, 22 hours. The video sprang to life on the big screen. The audio was crystal clear, enhanced by the high-tech microphone hidden in Nathan's button. On screen, the view was from Nathan's chest level. The rain was visible, streaking through the light of the street lamp. The window rolled down. Clear's throat, Sergeant Mitchell's face appeared clear as day in high definition. License and registration. The on-screen Mitchell barked. The courtroom watched as Nathan on the video calmly explained he was reaching for the glove box. They saw his hands visible the entire time. Then came the critical moment. On screen, Mitchell opened the door. He yanked Nathan out. The camera view spun wildly for a second as Nathan was slammed onto the hood. Then the camera stabilized, facing the windshield. The reflection in the windshield was perfect. The jury gasped collectively. In the reflection, clear as 4K could make it. They saw Sergeant Mitchell reach into his own tactical vest. They saw him pull out the baggie. They saw him pull out the gun. They saw him lean into the car, place the items under the seat, and then withdraw his hand on screen. Mitchell. Well, look what we have here. In the courtroom, the real Mitchell closed his eyes. A woman in the jewelry box covered her mouth with her hand. Nathan spoke from the stand, his voice cutting through the audio of the video. Pause at 220415. The clerk paused the video. The image froze on Mitchell's hand holding the dropped gun. Clear's throat, zoom in on the firearm, Nathan commanded. The image expanded. The pixels held. The gun was rusty. A distinct scratch running down the barrel. Now, Nathan said, turning to the evidence table where the physical gun sat in a plastic bag. Check the evidence bag. The gun Sergeant Mitchell claimed he found. It has that exact same scratch. Judge Patterson looked at the screen, then at the gun on the table. She slowly turned her head towards Sergeant Mitchell. Her expression had shifted from confusion to the cold fury of a woman who realized she had been used as a weapon for a criminal enterprise. "Sergeant Mitchell," the judge whispered, and the sound was scarier than her shouting. "You swore on the Bible." Mitchell tried to speak. "Your Honor, it's a deep fake. He's an expert. He doctored the video." "I'm not done." Nathan interrupted. "Play file 02. The screen flickered. This wasn't video. It was audio. A waveform appeared on the screen. "This was recorded last night," Nathan explained to the jury. Inside the holding cell at the county jail, Officer Carl Jensen, Sergeant Mitchell's partner, came to visit me off the record. Audio recording sound of a heavy metal door clanking shut. Jensen's voice shaky, whispering. "Look, man. I can't sleep. I know you didn't have that gun." Nathan's voice. "Then tell the truth, Jensen. Go to the judge." Jensen's voice. "I can't. Mitchell. He runs the precinct. He told me if I didn't back his play, he'd find drugs in my locker. He'd ruin me. He said we needed the stats. He said you were just some guy from the projects that nobody would miss you. He said it was easy." Nathan's voice. "It's never easy, Jensen." Jensen's voice. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, but I have a wife. I can't go against him." Click. End of recording. The audio cut out. All eyes turned to the back of the courtroom. Officer Carl Jensen was sitting in the back row in uniform, waiting to testify if needed. He was weeping. He had his head in his hands, his police hat on the floor between his feet. "Officer Jensen." Judge Patterson barked. "Stand up." Jensen stood up, shaking like a leaf. "Is that your voice?" Patterson demanded. Jensen looked at Mitchell. Mitchell made a slashing motion across his throat. A threat right there in open court. But Jensen looked at Nathan. Nathan nodded, a slow, reassuring nod that said, "I got you." Jensen took a deep breath. "Yes, Your Honor. That's me. Everything on the tape is true." Sergeant Mitchell brought the gun from his personal locker. "We never found anything in Mr. Cross's car." "You traitor!" Mitchell screamed, leaping from the witness box. "You weak little rat!" Mitchell lunged toward the gallery, his face purple with rage. He wasn't a cop anymore. He was a cornered animal. "Martz!" Nathan shouted, his command voice filling the room. But he didn't need to wait for the baifs. As Mitchell tried to hurdle the partition to get to Jensen, Nathan vaulted over the defense table. It happened in a blur. Nathan, the helpless defendant, moved with the precision of a man trained at Quantico. He intercepted Mitchell in midair. He swept Mitchell's leg, driving him into the carpeted floor with a thud that shook the room. Before Mitchell could scramble up, Nathan had his arm twisted behind his back in a camera lock. "Sergeant Bradley Mitchell," Nathan said, his voice calm but breathless right into Mitchell's ear. "You are under arrest for perjury, fabrication of evidence, conspiracy to deprive civil rights, and assault. You have the right to remain silent. I highly suggest you use it." The sound of Sergeant Bradley Mitchell hitting the floor wasn't just a thud. It was the sound of an empire collapsing. For 3 seconds, the entire courtroom was frozen in a tableau of absolute shock. The jurors were standing, hands, clear's throat, over their mouths. The court reporter had stopped typing. Judge Patterson was gripping her gavel, her knuckles white, staring over the bench at the unthinkable sight before her. The defendant, a man accused of being a street-level drug dealer, was pinning the city's most decorated police officer to the carpet with professional military precision. Mitchell struggled, grunting like a wounded boar. "Get off me. I'm a police officer. Shoot him. Someone shoot him." Clear's throat, Mitchell's face was pressed into the dust of the court carpet, his arm twisted behind his back in a kimura lock that applied excruciating pressure to his shoulder joint. Every time he bucked or thrashed, Nathan applied a millimeter more torque, sending a fresh wave of agony through the sergeant's body. "Stop moving, Bradley," Nathan said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a terrifying authority that cut through the panic. "You are currently assaulting a federal agent. If you resist further, I will snap your arm. Do you understand?" The two baifs, Rodriguez and Kowalski, had finally snapped out of their stupor. They rushed forward, hands on their tasers, shouting, "Let him go. Hands in the air. Stand down." Nathan roared. It wasn't a request. It was a command that came from the chest. A voice trained at Quantico to freeze active shooters. "He's FBI." Officer Carl Jensen yelled from the back of the room, his voice cracking with emotion. "Don't touch him. He's a federal agent." The baifs hesitated. They looked at the screen where the paused video still showed Mitchell planting the gun. They looked at Jensen, their fellow officer, weeping in the gallery. And they looked at the badge hanging around Nathan's neck. The blue wall of silence didn't just crack, it shattered. Bailiff Rodriguez took his hand off his taser. He took a step back. He looked at Mitchell on the floor, and for the first time in 10 years, he didn't help him. "Rodriguez!" Mitchell screamed into the carpet. "Help me, you traitor!" Rodriguez looked away. "I didn't see anything, Sarge. Just like you taught us." The breach. Before the chaos could spiral further, the heavy double oak doors at the back of the courtroom didn't just open. They exploded inward. "Federal agents, nobody move. Hands where we can see them." The shout was a synchronized wall of sound. A tactical team of 12 FBI agents surged into the room. They weren't wearing suits. They were in full tactical gear. Body armor, helmets, assault rifles slung across their chests, and windbreakers emblazed with the bright yellow letters, FBI. The visual contrast was jarring. The drab, dusty courtroom was suddenly filled with the sleek, overwhelming force of the United States government. Leading the charge was Assistant Director Julia Reynolds. She was a woman of small stature but immense presence, her eyes scanning the room like a raptor. She marched straight down the center aisle, flanked by two agents who moved to secure the exits. "Secure the gallery," Reynolds barked. "Nobody leaves without ID and a background check. Agent Morrison, secure the bench." Judge Patterson slumped back in her leather chair, looking tiny. "What is the meaning of this?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "This is my courtroom." "Not anymore, Your Honor," Reynolds said, stopping at the partition. "This is now a federal crime scene." Two agents moved to the defense table. Nathan released the pressure on Mitchell's arm, but didn't let go until the agents had slapped heavy-duty steel cuffs on Mitchell's wrists. Cuffs that were much tighter and less forgiving than the ones Mitchell used on his victims. They hauled Mitchell to his feet. He looked wild, manic. His uniform was disheveled, his medals askew. He looked from the agents to Nathan, his eyes bulging. "You can't do this." Mitchell spat, saliva flying. "I have jurisdiction here. This is a state matter. I want the chief. Call Chief Davidson." Nathan stood up. He straightened his tie. He smoothed the lapels of his cheap suit. He walked over to Mitchell, standing toe-to-toe with him. "Chief Davidson is currently in handcuffs in the parking lot of the 58th Precinct," Nathan said calmly. "We picked him up 10 minutes ago. He's already talking, Bradley. He's telling us about the stash houses. He's telling us about the protection money. Mitchell's face went the color of ash. The chief and detectives Williams, Harper, and Lopez, Nathan continued, ticking off the names on his fingers. Arrested the whole unit, Bradley. We didn't just come for you. We came for the rot. The prosecutors panic. While the attention was on Mitchell, a frantic scuffling sound came from the prosecution table. Assistant District Attorney Vincent Carter was in full panic mode. He had turned his back to the room and was frantically trying to stuff documents into his leather briefcase. His hands were shaking so badly he dropped a stack of files. He then grabbed his smartphone and began tapping furiously, trying to delete emails, wipe chats, burn the digital trail. "Mr. Carter," Nathan called out, his voice cutting through the noise. Carter froze. He didn't turn around. He just stopped tapping. "Don't hit delete," Nathan warned. "We mirrored your cloud server 3 days ago. Every email you sent to Mitchell telling him which cases to drop, we have them. Every text message where you negotiated the cut of the drug money, we have them." Carter slowly turned around. The smug, arrogant prosecutor who had laughed at Nathan an hour ago was gone. In his place was a terrified man realizing his life was over. I was coerced." Carter stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "Mitchell threatened me. I'm a victim here. I'm an officer of the court." "You are a co-conspirator in a Rachel enterprise," Agent Reynolds said, stepping up beside Nathan. "Vincent Carter, you are under arrest for racketeering, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to deprive civil rights." No, wait." Carter shrieked as an agent grabbed his arm. "I have immunity. I have prosecutorial immunity." "Immunity covers legal mistakes, Vincent," Nathan said, stepping closer, his eyes cold. "It doesn't cover taking bribes to send innocent men to prison so you can buy a beach house in the Caymans. We found the accounts, Vincent. Azure Horizon Shell Corporation really? You weren't even trying to hide it." The agent spun Carter around and cuffed him. The click of the handcuffs echoed loudly. Carter began to sob. Ugly, heaving sobs that were pathetic to witness. The judge's awakening. Judge Patterson watched as her courtroom was dismantled. She watched the prosecutor she trusted being dragged away. She watched the police officer she admired being treated like a terrorist. She looked at the USB drive still plugged into her clerk's computer. The image of the gun with the scratch, the planted evidence was still frozen on the big screen. She stood up. Her legs were shaky, but her anger was solidifying into something hard and dangerous. "Agent Cross," she said. The room went quiet. Nathan turned to the bench. "Yes, Your Honor." "Is it true?" she asked, her voice wavering. "Did he? Have they been doing this the whole time in my court?" "For 5 years, Your Honor," Nathan said gently. "We've identified at least 40 cases where Mitchell planted evidence. 40 men and women you sentenced. Most of them are still in prison." Patterson looked as if she had been slapped. She looked down at her hands. She had been the instrument of their cruelty. She had swung the hammer that sealed those fates. She looked up at Mitchell. Her eyes were no longer fearful. They were filled with the wrath of the betrayed. "Bradley Mitchell," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "I trusted you. The people of this county trusted you." "Judge, please," Mitchell begged, shifting his weight in the cuffs. "It's a setup. Just let me go. I can explain. You will explain nothing to me, Patterson snapped. You have made a mockery of this bench. You have turned this house of law into a den of thieves. She turned to the court clerk. Amanda, vacate all orders signed today. Mistrial declared in People v. Cross and draft an order for the immediate release of anyone currently held on the sole testimony of Sergeant Mitchell or Officer Jensen pending review. Yes, Judge, the clerk said, typing furiously. And Agent Cross? Patterson looked back at Nathan. Ma'am, get this filth out of my courtroom. She pointed a shaking finger at Mitchell. Before I forget that I am a judge and come down there myself. The walk of shame. Let's move, Reynolds ordered. The procession began. It was a reverse parade. Usually Mitchell walked down this aisle with his chest puffed out, nodding to the admirers. Now he was boxed in by 4 agents, his head forced down. As they passed the jewelry box, the jurors didn't look away. They stared. Juror number 4, a middle-aged mechanic who had been skeptical of Nathan during the trial, leaned over the railing. You make me sick. He spattered Mitchell. Mitchell flinched. He looked at the faces of the people he was supposed to serve. There was no fear in their eyes anymore, only disgust. The power he thrived on had evaporated instantly. They reached the back of the courtroom. Officer Carl Jensen was still standing there, tears streaming down his face. He looked at Mitchell. You said we were the good guys, Sarge, Jensen whispered. Mitchell stopped. He glared at Jensen with pure venom. You're dead, Jensen. You hear me? Snitches get stitches. I'll reach you. I have friends inside. Nathan grabbed Mitchell by the collar and slammed him into the doorframe. Clear's throat, you have no friends, Bradley. Not anymore. You aren't going to the county jail where your buddies work. You're going to federal holding. You're going to be a cop in a cage with the people you put there. You better pray for solitary. Mitchell swallowed hard. The reality of that threat finally pierced his delusion. Clear's throat, federal prison, general population. He was a sheep walking into a den of wolves he had starved. The public spectacle. The doors burst open leading out into the main hallway of the courthouse. Usually this hallway was quiet, but word had spread. The jungle telegraph of the courthouse. Defense attorneys, clerks, family members had been buzzing for the last 20 minutes. The FBI is here. Mitchell is down. The Clear's throat hallway was lined with people. It was a gauntlet. As Mitchell was led out, a hush fell over the crowd. Then a single voice rang out. That's him. That's the bastard. It was the mother of a young man Mitchell had arrested 2 years ago. She surged forward, held back by a marshal. Where's my son, Mitchell? She screamed. You planted that crack on him. Where's my son? Mitchell kept his head down, but the shouts multiplied. Rot in hell, Mitchell. Karma comes around. Take his badge. Flashbulbs popped. The press had arrived. Reporters were shoving microphones toward the group. Cameras capturing every second of Mitchell's humiliation. This was the footage that would play on the 6 Gallo PM news. The legendary Sergeant Mitchell dragged out in irons, sweating, pale, and defeated. Then came Otta Carter. He was weeping openly now, his expensive suit rumpled, asking for his lawyer over and over again. The sight of the arrogant prosecutor, reduced to a crying mess, was almost as shocking as Mitchell's arrest. The final blow. Nathan stepped out of the courthouse doors and into the cool air. The rain had stopped it, the sun was trying to break through the clouds. He watched as the agents loaded Mitchell into the back of an armored black SUV. Just before they slammed the door, Mitchell looked out. He locked eyes with Nathan one last time. "Why?" Mitchell yelled, his voice cracking. "You could have just showed the badge. You could have stopped me at the car. Why let it go this far?" Nathan walked up to the open door. He rested his hand on the roof of the car. "Because, Bradley," Nathan said softly, so only Mitchell could hear. "If I had showed you my badge that night, you would have let me go. You would have apologized. And then the next night, you would have done the exact same thing to some kid who didn't have a badge, who didn't have a voice." Nathan leaned in closer. "I didn't do this to save myself. I did this to catch you being you. I let you hang yourself with your own arrogance. I needed the world to see the monster, not just the uniform." Mitchell stared at him, mouth open, realizing the depth of the trap he had walked into. He hadn't been unlucky. He had been hunted. "Enjoy the cage, Sergeant," Nathan said. He slammed the heavy door shut. Thud. The sound was final. Agent Reynolds walked up to Nathan. She handed him a file. "Good work, Agent Cross," she said. "The data from your wiretap is already being decrypted. We have enough to indict the mayor if he knew about the kickbacks." "He knew," Nathan said, watching the black SUV drive away, lights flashing. "They all knew." He loosened his tie. He took a deep breath of the fresh air. "What now?" Reynolds asked. Nathan looked back at the courthouse where the victims' families were pouring out, looking dazed but hopeful. For the first time in years, they were smiling. "Now," Nathan said, "we start the paperwork and then I'm going to go get my car out of impound. I have a feeling the fees have been waived." The months following the arrest of Sergeant Bradley Mitchell were not just a legal proceeding. They were an exorcism for the city of Riverside. The 58th Precinct didn't just get a slap on the wrist. It was dismantled from the studs up. The FBI's Operation Blue Rot, led by the data collected by Agent Nathan Cross, acted like a wrecking ball. It wasn't just Mitchell. It was the desk sergeant who looked the other way. It was the evidence clerk who misplaced dash cam footage. It was the captain who signed off on overtime pay for busts that never happened. But the first domino to truly fall, and the one that sealed Mitchell's fate, was Assistant District Attorney Vincent Carter. 2 weeks before Mitchell's sentencing in a sterile, windowless interview room at the Federal Detention Center, Carter broke. The man who had once strutted around Courtroom 6D in Italian loafers was now wearing a gray jumpsuit that smelled of industrial detergent. He looked 10 years older. He wasn't facing a corruption charge. He was facing a RACHO predicate, Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. "I want a deal," Carter had whispered to Nathan across the metal table. Nathan, sitting comfortably with a file of bank statements in front of him, didn't blink. "You don't have leverage, Vincent. We have your Cayman accounts. We have the emails where you told Mitchell which cases to throw. I can give you the bodies," Carter said, his voice trembling. "Mitchell didn't just plant drugs. There are cases, cold cases, missing persons from the East Side. He bragged about them. He said, if you control the street, you control who disappears. That changed everything. It elevated Mitchell from a dirty cop to a monster." Carter's testimony secured his own plea deal, 12 years in federal prison instead of 25, but it nailed the coffin shut on Bradley Mitchell. The day of reckoning, 6 months after the arrest, sentencing day arrived. It was a Tuesday, much like the rainy Tuesday when Nathan had been pulled over. But today, the sky was a piercing, unforgiving blue. The federal courthouse in downtown Chicago was a fortress of limestone and glass, a stark contrast to the dingy district court where Mitchell used to reign as king. This was the big leagues. There were no friendly baifs here. The marshals standing guard were stone-faced, carrying automatic rifles. The courtroom was packed to capacity. The gallery was a sea of faces, reporters from every major network, civil rights activists, and most heartbreakingly, the families of Mitchell's victims. There were mothers clutching framed photos of sons currently rotting in prison on false charges. There were fathers who had lost their businesses because they refused to pay Mitchell's protection fees. Nathan Cross sat in the front row behind the prosecution table. He was dressed in his standard bureau suit, sharp and intimidating, but he felt a heavy weight in his chest. This wasn't a victory lap. It was a funeral for the lives Mitchell had stolen. "All rise," the Claire announced, her voice echoed in the cavernous room. The Honorable Judge Thomas Marshall entered. Marshall was different from Judge Patterson. He was a federal judge with a reputation for being intellectually brilliant and utterly merciless to public servants who betrayed their oaths. He didn't slam gavels. He whispered sentences that ended lives. "Bring out the prisoner," Judge Marshall ordered. The side door opened. The silence in the room was sucked out by the sound of chains. Clink, drag, clink, drag. Bradley Mitchell shuffled into the room. The transformation was shocking. The super cop who had sneered at Nathan was gone. Mitchell had lost at least 30 pounds. His skin was pasty, deprived of sunlight. His hair, once perfectly gelled, was shaved close to his skull. He wore the bright orange jumpsuit of a high-risk federal inmate. His hands were cuffed to a belly chain. His ankles were shackled together. He didn't look at the gallery. He stared at the floor. He looked small. He sat at the defense table next to his court-appointed attorney, a weird-looking man named Mr. Franklin who knew he was merely a chaperone to a slaughter. "We are here for the sentencing in the matter of United States versus Bradley Mitchell," Judge Marshall began, peering over his spectacles. "The defendant has been found guilty on 48 counts, including perjury, deprivation of rights under color of law, conspiracy to distribute narcotics, and obstruction of justice. Does the government wish to make a statement?" Assistant Director Julia Reynolds stood up for the prosecution. "We do, Your Honor, but we would like to yield our time to one of the victims. We call Mrs. Dorothy Simmons to the podium." A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. An elderly African-American woman leaning heavily on a cane slowly made her way to the microphone stand. She was trembling. Nathan watched Mitchell. For the first time, Mitchell looked up. He saw Mrs. Simmons and he flinched, a visible physical recoil. "Mr. Mitchell," Mrs. Simmons said, her voice shaking but gaining strength with every word. "Do you remember my boy, Jerome?" Mitchell looked away. "Look at me," she screamed, the raw pain tearing through the decorum of the court. Mitchell slowly turned his head. "Jerome was 19, she said, tears streaming down her face. "He was going to college. He wanted to be an architect. You stopped him because he was walking in a neighborhood you said he didn't belong in. You planted heroin in his backpack. I begged you. I came to the station and I begged you on my knees. I told you he was a good boy. She took a breath that sounded like a sob. You told me if he's a good boy, he'll do fine in prison. Clear's throat. Jerome hanged himself in his cell 3 days later. He couldn't handle the shame. You didn't just kill my son, Mr. Mitchell. You killed my family name. You killed my future. And you went home and ate dinner like it was nothing. The courtroom was dead silent. Even the court reporter had stopped typing, wiping a tear from her eye. I forgive you, Mrs. Simmons whispered. And the shock in the room was palpable. I forgive you because the Bible tells me to. But I want you to rot. I want you to sit in a concrete box until you forget what the sun looks like. I want you to remember Jerome every time you close your eyes. She stepped back. Nathan reached out and held her hand as she walked past him back to her seat. Her hand was cold, but her grip was iron. Mr. Franklin, Judge Marshall said, his voice like ice. Does your client wish to speak? Mr. Franklin leaned over to Mitchell. Bradley, don't. It won't help. But Mitchell shook him off. The arrogance, the narcissism that had fueled him for 20 years flared up one last time. He couldn't handle being the villain. In his twisted mind, he was still the hero. Mitchell stood up, the chains rattling loudly. He gripped the podium with white knuckles. You people don't get it, Mitchell rasped. His voice was hoarse from disuse. You sit here in your air-conditioned room with your suits and your laws. You don't know what's out there. He gestured awkwardly with his cuffed hands toward the gallery. I cleaned up the filth, Mitchell shouted, his face flushing red. I did what had to be done. The law is broken. The courts let the animals go. I made sure they stayed off the streets. Yeah, maybe I planted a gun or two. Maybe I fixed a report. But I kept this city safe. You should be thanking me. I am the line between civilization and chaos. He turned his glare directly onto Nathan Cross. And you, Mitchell, spat, you think you're special because you have a federal badge. You're a rat. You tricked me. You didn't win fair. You came into my town and you lied to get me. Nathan stood up slowly. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. I didn't lie, Bradley, Nathan said calmly. I just let you show the world who you really are. You aren't the line between civilization and chaos. You are the chaos. Sit down, defendant. Judge Marshall barked. Mr. Mitchell, your lack of remorse is truly staggering. Mitchell slumped back into his chair. He looked at the judge, expecting a lecture. He got something much worse. He got math. Judge Marshall opened the thick file in front of him. He took a pen and adjusted his glasses. Bradley Mitchell, you have betrayed the public trust in a manner I have rarely seen in 30 years on the bench. You viewed the Constitution not as a set of rules, but as an obstacle to your own ego. You destroyed lives for sport, for profit, and for quota numbers. The judge looked down at the papers. For counts 1 through 10, perjury and falsification of records, I sentence you to 5 years each, to run concurrently. Mitchell let out a breath. 5 years. He could do 5 years. However, Marshall continued, his voice dropping an octave. For counts 11 through 30, deprivation of civil rights resulting in bodily injury and death, specifically regarding the suicide of Jerome Simmons and the assault on Mr. Cross. I am sentencing you to the maximum penalty allowed. Mitchell froze. That is 20s for each count, Marshall said. And given the predatory nature of your crimes and your absolute refusal to accept responsibility, I am ordering these sentences to run consecutively. A gasp ripped through the courtroom. The math was happening in everyone's head at once. That is a total of 400 years, Marshall said, his face impassive. Wait, Mitchell stammered. Wait, Your Honor, that's a death sentence. And finally, Marshall ignored him. For the Racho conspiracy charges and the trafficking of narcotics using police resources, I sentence you to an additional 30 years. Judge Marshall closed the folder. The sound was like a gunshot in the silence. The total sentence is 430 years in the custody of the Federal Bureau of Prisons. You will be remanded to ADX Florence, the Supermax facility in Colorado. You will be in administrative segregation for your own protection, which means 23 hours a day in solitary confinement. You are not eligible for parole. Mitchell's legs gave out. He physically collapsed into his chair, the chains clattering against the wood. For 30 years, ADX Florence, it was the Alcatraz of the Rockies. It was where they sent terrorists and spies. It was a concrete tomb. I'm a cop. Mitchell screamed, panic finally setting in. You can't put me in Supermax. I'm a cop. You were a cop. Judge Marshall corrected him. Now you are inmate 90824. Get him out of my sight. Two massive U.S. Marshals grabbed Mitchell by the arms. He didn't walk. He was dragged. His feet scrambled for purchase on the carpet. His dignity completely gone. Nathan. Mitchell screamed as he was hauled down the aisle. He looked at the FBI agent with wild, terrified eyes. Nathan, please help me. Don't let them put me in the hole. I'll tell you everything. I'll give you more names. Nathan stepped into the aisle. He blocked the path of the marshals for a brief second. They paused, respecting the federal agent. Nathan leaned in close. The smell of fear coming off Mitchell was accurate. You had a chance to speak, Bradley, Nathan said softly. You chose to brag. You chose to insult Mrs. Simmons. I'm sorry, Mitchell wept, snot running down his face. I'm sorry. Okay, I said it. Help me. Nathan reached into his pocket. For a second, Mitchell looked hopeful. Was he going to pull out a phone? Make a call. Nathan pulled out a small cheap plastic lighter. He held it up. You asked for a light that night, remember? Nathan said, when you planted the weed in my car, you told me. Smoking kills, kid. Nathan dropped the lighter into Mitchell's cuffed hands. Keep it, Nathan said. It's the only light you're going to see for a long time. Move him. Nathan nodded to the marshals. No, no. Mitchell's screams echoed down the hallway as the heavy oak doors slammed shut, cutting off his voice as if a switch had been flipped. For the aftermath, the courtroom slowly emptied. Mrs. Simmons hugged Nathan, her tears soaking into his suit jacket. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for giving my boy his name back. Nathan walked out of the courthouse alone. The press was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. A hungry pack of wolves looking for a sound bite. Agent Cross. Agent Cross. Is justice served? Agent Cross. Do you think the sentence was too harsh? Nathan stopped on the middle landing. He looked out at the city of Chicago. The wind was blowing off the lake, cold and clean. He saw Officer Carl Jensen standing at the edge of the crowd. Jensen was wearing civilian clothes, jeans, and a hoodie. He had been fired, stripped of his pension, and was working construction now. But he looked lighter. He gave Nathan a small wave. Nathan nodded back. Jensen had lost his career, but he had saved his soul. Nathan turned to the microphones. "There is no such thing as too harsh when you use the law as a weapon against the innocent," Nathan said, his voice carrying over the noise of the traffic. Bradley Mitchell thought the badge made him a god. Today, he learned that the badge is just a piece of metal. It's the oath that matters. And if you break that oath, if you prey on the people you swore to protect, it doesn't matter if you are a street dealer or a sergeant. We will find you. We will expose you, and we will bury you under the weight of your own lies. He didn't wait for follow-up questions. He walked down the stairs, the cameras clicking furiously behind him. Clear's throat, he reached his black SUV. He opened the door and paused. He looked at his reflection in the window. He didn't see a hero. He just saw a man who had done his job. He got in, started the engine, and merged into traffic. Far away, in the back of an armored transport van, speeding toward the highway. Bradley Mitchell stared through the reinforced wire mesh of the tiny window. He watched the city skyline shrink into the distance. The skyscrapers of Chicago, the streets he had ruled, the precinct where he had been a king, they got smaller and smaller until they were just a smudge on the horizon. Then the van turned and they were gone. Mitchell leaned his head against the cold metal wall and closed his eyes. In the darkness, all he could see was the reflection of a badge and the face of the man who had warned him to spell his name right. It was going to be a long 430 years. And that is the story of how one arrogant officer messed with the wrong suspect. Bradley Mitchell thought his badge gave him the power of a god, but he forgot that justice is blind and sometimes it wears a wire. He is currently serving his 45-year sentence at a maximum security facility in Colorado. This story is a reminder that power unchecked is tyranny, but the truth always has a way of coming out. If you enjoyed this story of heavy karma and justice served, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets us know you want more true crime dramas like this one. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story. What do you think? Was 45 years enough for Mitchell or did he deserve more? Let me know in the comments below. I'll be pinning the best response. Stay safe and watch your